She trembled in the cold, revealing an unexpected bond, just the two of them, no options, yet ever pressing against the encroaching dread. Sarah clutched her daughter Lily, feeling the chill of the snowstorm seep into their modest home like an uninvited guest. Flickering candlelight cast ghostly shadows on the walls, turning the once cozy space into a prison of worries. With each gust of wind outside, her mind raced, gripped by an overwhelming sense of vulnerability and dread. Could she really weather this storm, both outdoors and in her life? "The power's out. It's going to get cold," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. Yet underneath, uncertainty and guilt spiraled through her. She had a good job as a nurse at the local hospital, and yet the threat of financial collapse loomed larger every day. With bills piling up and no real safety net to catch her if she fell, her role as a single mother felt like a fragile facade. The fear of failure as a provider gnawed at her relentlessly, threatening to unravel the careful balance she had maintained. Outside, the wind howled, a stark reminder that the world was unforgiving. What would happen if she lost her job? The stark reality danced ominously at the edges of her thoughts. She knew if she spoke up about the rumors swirling through the hospital about her colleagues' mistreatment, she risked not only her job, but their livelihoods. A chilling fear gripped her, a fear bred from the harsh lessons of survival and responsibility. The flash of her grandfather's face crossed her mind, a steadfast figure always standing against the tides of injustice. But how could she carry that legacy? The idea of confronting a system that already felt suffocating pushed her into deeper conflict. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With the biting cold pressing against her skin, Sarah began to rummage through the cluttered attic in search of anything that could stir warmth. Her fingers brushed against an old box, dusty and forgotten. As she pulled it down, the weight of its contents felt heavier than usual. Letters poured forth like memories resurrected from the grave, each one penned by her grandfather during his own battles. She opened one and began reading, caught in the tangible embrace of his words. The love and resilience he imbued would illuminate her path ahead, or so she hoped. Suddenly the silence broke with Lily's vibrant voice. "Mom, tell me a story." But Sarah hesitated. The pressure of the unspoken anguish mounted as she pondered her responsibilities, torn between comfort and concern. Could she inspire courage in Lily while feeling so lost herself? The walls of their home seemed to close in, reminiscent of the walls of the hospital, a place she loved, yet dreaded showing her true self. They nestled together to share warmth, but the storm outside mirrored the storm inside her heart. Would speaking up ultimately shatter the thin facade of stability? Would standing for justice weave a new fabric of resilience? Or would it condemn them to deeper struggles? The questions burned as brightly as the candle flames, casting flickering shadows of doubt. Each heartbeat echoed in her mind, a reminder that their world hung in delicate balance, one that needed both a voice steeped in love and a heart ready to confront what was right, even amidst the fiercest storms. As tender yet agonizing questions filled the space between them, the deepest cuts lingered unaddressed. Their shared legacy awaited the brave decision, teetering on the edge of possibilities as uncertainty loomed, cold and biting. The letters lay scattered around them, each a fragmented piece of a legacy that tugged insistently at Sarah's heart. The warmth of Lily nestled against her side contrasted starkly with the icy fears that clouded her thoughts. She felt palpably the weight of expectation, not only from herself, but from the memory of her grandfather, whose words had once inspired her to fight for what was right, even when it was daunting. "Mom, read another one." Lily's bright eyes sparkled with innocence, unaware of the turbulent thoughts swirling in her mother's mind. Sarah's fingers trembled as she picked up another letter. "Okay, sweetie." The momentary distraction provided a fragile respite from her worries. A rush of warmth spread through her as she began to read, but underneath, a gnawing sensation reminded her that this was all just an escape, a reprieve from the reality that demanded confrontation. As she read, she recognized themes of courage and vulnerability that mirrored her own struggles. There was a story of her grandfather standing up against a corrupt supervisor, risking not only his job but also the financial well-being of his family. He felt he had to speak up, she murmured, thoughts turning inward. Even when it meant putting everything on the line? Lily's soft voice broke through her reverie. Did he win? I think he won something more, Sarah answered, reflecting on the deeper value of her grandfather's actions. They had given him respect, and ultimately a sense of peace. Sometimes standing up for what's right means you find a strength you didn't know you had, but the truth felt starkly out of reach. Sarah was trapped in a cycle of fear and uncertainty. The hospital, her sanctuary and battleground, clung to her mind. The knowledge that her silence could perpetuate harm to others gnawed at her conscience. Could she conjure the same strength her grandfather had? The thought of addressing the growing systemic injustice caused her gut to twist painfully. She could picture the faces of those affected by the colleagues' harassment, and guilt washed over her. She was complicit in their suffering by refusing to act. The flickering candlelight flickered dangerously, as if echoing the turbulence within her. She needed clarity, a decision. Lily's presence weighed heavily. Her daughter's innocence demanded protection, yet called for empowerment. What legacy would she leave for her? Mom, will you be brave like Grandpa? Lily's voice cut through, piercing to the heart of Sarah's turmoil. It was not just a question, it was a challenge. In Lily's innocent inquiry, she saw the reflection of her own hesitation. A powerful tide of responsibility surged within her. Maybe now was not the time to be paralyzed by fear. If she chose to shield herself for the sake of security, was she sacrificing the very principles she wished to instill in Lily? I don't know yet, sweetie, but I want to try, she answered, her voice steadier than before. Feeling the warmth of the moment and the weight of the decision, Sarah felt a flicker of resolve begin to ignite within her. As the storm raged outside, the instability seemed to echo the choices that lay before her. Personal sacrifice against contribution to communal integrity. Suddenly, she understood that action was not merely for her or for her job. It was about creating a safe space and principled foundation for Lily's future. What would it take to find that courage? The thought gripped her tightly, a moment of clarity pressing against the chaos, leaving her heart racing with anticipation. As she pondered her next steps, she felt the raw urgency of the decisions looming. Decisions that would potentially alter the course of her life and her daughter's. With a deep breath, Sarah made a silent promise to confront her fears and embrace the legacy her grandfather had left her, even if it meant standing alone amid a tempest. Tomorrow would bring more than just a new day. It would bring her first steps toward change. Was she ready to face the growing storm within the hospital? The question lingered like a whisper, urging her to prepare for what lay ahead. The morning broke with an oppressive grayness. Clouds hung low like heavy curtains, mirroring the weight pressing on Sarah's chest. Every breath seemed to echo with the culmination of her internal conflict as she arrived at the hospital. The familiar squeak of the swing doors felt foreign today. Each step deeper into its sterile embrace rippled through her with the reminder of the truth she was grappling with. She glanced at the faces of her colleagues, some rushing past in their hurried pursuit of routine, others exchanging pleasantries. But Sarah felt as though she were enveloped in a fog, disconnected from their world, her stomach churning with unspoken dread. Did they feel the same degree of responsibility? Or had they already chosen comfort over confrontation? In the break room, a small congregation gathered over steaming cups. Their laughter felt hurtful, a stark contrast to the turmoil whirling inside her. She had spent too long in passive observation, drowning in the inertia of fear. The letters littering her living room nagged at her, the words of her grandfather a haunting echo. Would she truly follow in his footsteps, or would she allow herself to be swallowed by silence? With a newfound resolve tugging at her, Sarah stepped forward and joined the group. "Can we talk about Kevin?" she ventured, her voice slicing through the chatter like a knife. The combination of the name and her tone extinguished the laughter immediately, replaced by wary glances. "Sarah, maybe we should just let it go. He's high up in the hierarchy," one nurse murmured, her eyes darting around the room, as if expecting judgment from unseen forces. "And what about those of us who suffer because of it?" Sarah countered, her heart pounding against her ribcage, determination intertwined with fear. "Don't you think speaking out is the only way to challenge this endlessly safe silence?" Another nurse shifted uncomfortably, a knot of disbelief knitting her brow. "What do you plan to do? File a report? You know how those things go." A surge of adrenaline coursed through Sarah, fueled by their skepticism. "We owe it to ourselves and our patients to seek justice. We can't keep turning a blind eye." Her words hung heavy in the air, thick with defiance, burning brighter than the fluorescent lights overhead. With trepidation, she realized this was her moment to sway minds or risk isolating herself further. It was clear they had grown accustomed to appeasing the powerful, but this was more than a job, more than a paycheck. It was a commitment to ethics. She wasn't just advocating for herself anymore. She was fighting for those too afraid to raise their voices. Standing up is risky, but do we want to hand our careers over to fear? There's a chance to make things better for us and the patients we serve. Isn't that worth fighting for? The sincerity behind her words began to resonate, nudging at the hardened barriers of their complacency. The group fell silent, eyes searching for signs of collaboration. But within the thick tension, Sarah spotted a flicker of something. Perhaps encouragement, perhaps empathy. Was she planting a seed for change, or steering into a maelstrom that could swallow her whole? The internal struggle persisted, but she felt an unfamiliar strength burgeoning, purposeful and anxious. "Tell us what you need," one nurse finally stated, a note of tentative support woven in her voice. It was a sliver of momentum, a potential dawn breaking through her doubt. But as she gathered her thoughts to formulate a plan, a shadow crossed the doorway, catching her attention. Kevin stood there, brow furrowed in curiosity, as if he could sense the tension that enveloped the room. Their eyes locked for a fleeting moment, and something within Sarah recalibrated. The stakes had risen, and she fully understood the gravity of what lay ahead. She felt raw and exposed, yet exhilarated. This was not merely about her anymore, but about a collective integrity that could not be ignored. Could she withstand the gale-gathering strength behind Kevin's scrutinizing gaze, ready to strike? As Sarah's heart raced, she was faced with the reality of facing her greatest fear, the man who wielded power through intimidation. The time had come to confront not only systemic injustice, but her own limitations. All the preparation, all the contemplation had led to this critical juncture where courage and consequence collided. Was she ready to bear the weight of consequence for her actions? As silence settled over the break room, the air thickened with palpable tension. Sarah held her breath, grappling with the flicker of doubt rising in her chest. Kevin was more than just an intimidating presence. He represented a system built on silence and complicity. Yet she felt the warmth of tentative support beginning to stir amongst her colleagues. "Well," Kevin drawled, stepping further into the room, his voice smooth, almost mocking. "What are we discussing so animatedly? Policy changes? Staff shortages?" His eyes scanned the group, but settled back on Sarah as if sensing her heartbeat quickening under his scrutiny. For a moment, she was paralyzed under the weight of his gaze. Would he dismiss her outright? Or had her words made an impact? She felt the room holding its collective breath, waiting for her response. "Actually, Kevin," Sarah found her voice steadying herself, "we were just discussing the issues surrounding your leadership. Your methods are causing serious distress among staff and patients alike." The declaration surprised even her, unfolding like an unscrolled banner, a declaration of war against complacency. His expression hardened, the corners of his mouth tightening in a controlled mask of displeasure. Sarah could see the gears turning in his mind, calculating repercussions. "What do you mean by distress? Everyone seems to be managing just fine. My door is always open," he replied, the feigned geniality not quite veiling his condescension. "Open but not inviting, it seems," Sarah shot back, emboldened by something she couldn't quite articulate. "We see the decisions you make, the patients are suffering, and so are we." Kevin's brow furrowed as he leaned against the counter, arms crossed. The laughter from moments before had evaporated, leaving raw tension in its wake. Sarah hoped her colleagues sensed the gravity of this moment. They were at a precipice, and her willingness to confront that reality was urging them to edge closer. His irritation fizzled into a smirk, a clear attempt to unsettle her. You think a few complaints and a rumor mill can shake my foundation? I've dealt with pushback before. It won't end well for those who challenge me. Her heart raced, but this time it pulsed with a sense of clarity, a resolve forming in the depths of her mind. His intimidation tactics no longer felt like an impenetrable wall, but rather a barrier she could navigate. With newfound strength coursing through her veins, she allowed herself to smile in defiance. I understand the risks, she admitted, her voice composing itself into something stronger than she felt. But some bridges are worth burning. I'm not afraid of you anymore. Kevin frowned, surprise flickering across his features, momentarily disrupting his facade of indifference. The other nurses began to murmur amongst themselves, recollecting a shared desire to challenge the status quo. Her plan was formulating, but she had to break this moment of vulnerability, not with fear, but with action. I want a meeting, she continued, keeping her tone deliberate, with the administration to discuss patient care and staff well-being. We will not remain silent any longer. How quaint, Kevin said, but his patronizing tone lacked its usual edge. Real issues require real solutions, not dismissive attitudes. Her words remained steady, bolstered by the subtle nods and gestures of solidarity from her colleagues. As Kevin weighed his options, Sarah watched his demeanor shift, a crack forming in his armor. He stood poised to lash out, to restore his authority, but the ground beneath him had begun to sink. Just as he opened his mouth to respond, a voice interjected from the back of the room. We stand with Sarah. One nurse stepped forward, emboldened by the atmosphere of change ignited moments earlier. In that moment, Sarah felt the tide shifting. Might there be a way forward? A chance for real change? That strength, intangible yet potent, erupted within her as they rallied behind her message. But amidst the burgeoning hope, a cold realization loomed closer. This confrontation was merely the beginning. The struggle for integrity was far from over, and the consequences of her actions could spread like ripples in a still pond, yet she was prepared to take the plunge. As Kevin's eyes darkened, she braced for the impending backlash. The atmosphere hung thick, charged with possibility and tension as they awaited his response. What price would she have to pay for the courage they had summoned together? As the moment stretched, she faced the uncertainty with resolve. The struggle for justice was about to unfold, and she now understood. Standing up meant embracing both the weight of responsibility and the exhilarating rush of consequence. Fine, Kevin sneered, placing his hands on the counter. Let's see how far you're willing to go with this. But deep inside, Sarah knew the real question was how far she was ready to go for herself. As the words hung in the air, Sarah sensed the weight of the moment. Kevin's sneer revealed more than contempt. It betrayed an underlying worry, a flicker of uncertainty about his power. She stood there, anchored by an astonishing resolve, contemplating not just the immediate confrontation, but the broader implications of her actions. With her heart pounding, she gathered her colleagues into a silent circle of support. Their comforting nods reassured her that she wasn't alone. Each one of them wore a similar facade of worry, coaxing their silent camaraderie into a louder collective sense of purpose. For years, they had tolerated Kevin's authoritarian grip, yet here they were, on the brink of perceiving themselves as agents of change. Tomorrow we prepare for the meeting, Sarah announced softly but firmly, addressing the group. We need data, real-life examples and testimonies from staff and patients alike. If Kevin wants to play games, we'll show him we are serious. Determination swelled within her. It wasn't just about her own fears. This was the first step towards nurturing a culture of transparency. Yet, as they began to strategize, an anxious ripple coursed through her thoughts. She knew that she was taking on more than just Kevin. She was challenging a deep-rooted system, a foundation of complacency that had enabled dangerous practices. The prospect weighed heavily on her, threatening to resurface those nagging doubts. What if they faltered? What if Kevin struck back harder than anticipated? The stakes were escalating, and with them, her courage demanded a fiercer determination. Can we really do this? A voice murmured from the back of the room. It was Janet, her eyes darting from Sarah to the floor, clearly voicing unspoken fears that lingered in the air. Yes, Sarah replied, her voice unyielding. I know it feels scary, but we must refuse to operate in silence any longer. If we don't act, things will only worsen. she sensed a stirring among her colleagues, a quiet commitment crystallizing from the shared experience of dissatisfaction and unresolved grievances. "Let's gather our information tonight. Each of us has stories that matter," Sarah continued, igniting a spark in the room. Conversations soon bubbled over with ideas and anecdotes. Colleagues began exchanging tales of neglect and mishaps overseen by Kevin, perhaps out of incompetence or malice, but just as likely a misguided understanding of leadership. As she encouraged her teammates to share, Sarah felt her confidence growing. This act of camaraderie was her forge, allowing her to shape doubt into purpose. Her mind raced as she began to draft a speech for the meeting, clear, backed with evidence, and unwavering in justice. Once the conversation flowed, Sarah grew aware of another pang within her, a nagging feeling that the path forward was fraught with peril. What if those stories came biting back? What if they unraveled more than just Kevin's authority? The potential ramifications had begun to unsettle her, inching their way into the epicenter of her resolve. "Meet back here in an hour to recap," she suggested, conscious of how easily doubt could creep back into their minds. "Let's do it," came the chorus of agreement, but as her colleagues shuffled away, a knot tightened in her stomach. The deeper she delved into this fight, the more it demanded from her, not just bravery but undeniable fortitude to challenge what lay beneath the surface. As she sat alone for a moment, the break room echoed with the fading murmurs of her peers. She exhaled slowly, grappling with the sense of isolation inherent in this journey. For all the allies she had, the actual confrontation would rest heavily on her shoulders. Determined to face the repercussions, Sarah picked up her notepad and a pen, confident that now was the time for her own awakening. She could dismiss the tremor in her hands as adrenaline. She would channel it into action. Yet ingrained in her anticipation was the harsh reality of an unfolding battle. Her mind drifted to the question that haunted her. What would she become through this fight? The uncertainty it stirred amplified her urgency. As she prepared to leave the break room, a foreboding feeling gripped her. The plunge into change had started, but it quickly felt like more than just an act of defiance. It was a gateway to revealing true vulnerability, an unknown world that could redefine who she was. The stakes were about to rise, and as Kevin awaited her next move, Sarah felt that the real test of her willingness to fight for change had yet to arrive. What would the next challenge uncover? Would she emerge stronger, or would attacking the establishment shatter the fragile sense of self she had only just begun to discover? The following day dawned with a heavy sky, as if the world itself was bracing for the disruption Sarah was about to unleash. The day stretched out before her, full of possibility and peril. With a steadying breath, she focused on her drive towards empowerment, recalling the energy of the previous evening's discussions. The thought of gathering facts, stories, evidence, and the unified front she and her colleagues had begun to cultivate served as her anchor. She had something to fight for. As she walked into the office, the humming of the fluorescent lights overhead seemed louder than ever, mirroring the tumult within her. Each step felt like was echoing her internal struggle. Today was not just another day, it was a reckoning, a moment where she would confront not just Kevin, but the parts of herself that had long felt invisible. She stood before her team, eyes bright with purpose. "Remember, we are here to do more than just criticize. We are here to build a foundation for change," she declared, her voice cutting through the tension. The nods of encouragement from her colleagues fueled her resolve, but uncertainty loomed in her mind. Could she truly embody the leader they needed? Or was she still that timid intern, only pretending to have a voice? As they shared their findings and framed their arguments, Sarah listened intently to their experiences. Each story shared at the table reinforced the realities of their everyday frustrations and the dangers of neglect. She could feel the collective energy surging as they readied themselves to present their findings, a tangible shift from a group subdued by fear to one inspired by the possibility of change. Yet inside, another voice lingered, whispering doubts. What would it mean if Kevin retaliated? Would loyalty wane in the face of fierce authority? Sarah dismissed the thoughts, reminding herself that she was stepping into her power, however unsteady it felt. During their lunch break, Sarah ventured to a nearby cafe with Janet. The aroma of coffee filled the air, providing an intoxicating distraction. As they settled into their seats, Sarah sensed something unspoken between them, a sisterhood forged in vulnerability. Janet leaned in, hesitantly breaking the silence. What if he doesn't take us seriously? What if he tries to punish us? The tremor in Janet's voice reflected the unease sitting on Sarah's own chest. We can't let fear dictate our choices. We are seeking accountability, not just for ourselves, but for the team and everyone who believes in patient care. The words emerged with sincere optimism, but deep within, Sarah could feel fear intertwining with her conviction. What if the very act of standing up meant losing everything? The conversation shifted towards personal tales of resilience, moments when they both had faced fear, and for the first time, Sarah recognized her own evolution from passive observer to an active participant in defining their narrative. It was as if unveiling those stories of strength were shaping her identity, making clear her potential to impact change in tangible ways. When they finally returned to the office, Sarah felt invigorated, her purpose crystallizing with each beat of her heart. In the meeting room, they faced Kevin, flanked by his usual smug demeanor. The air around them thickened with tension. As her colleagues spoke up, sharing statistics and personal accounts, Sarah felt herself shifting from a sheer observer to a commanding presence. Yet, as she prepared to speak, doubt lurked at the edges like a dark shadow. Would her voice carry when it mattered most? Just as her heartbeat quickened, a spark ignited inside her. This was not merely about Kevin. It was a chance to reclaim her narrative and that of her team. The meeting spiraled into a confrontation, with Kevin feigning disinterest. Each challenge he tossed felt like a weight on her chest, thickening her resolve. She steadied her voice, recalling the trust her colleagues had placed in her. Kevin, we owe it to our patients and ourselves to ensure that our practices reflect our standards of care. This isn't just a critique, it's a call for the integrity of our work, Sarah asserted. The room fell silent. Her declaration seemed to reverberate against the walls, a stark declaration of intent. Had she ignited the spark of necessary change? As Kevin's eyes narrowed, uncertainty gripped her. Would he retaliate? The immediate consequences loomed over her, imbuing a violent tension within. Would this stand solidify her growth, or would it fracture the fragile foundation she had only just begun to reinforce? The true confrontation had begun, but Sarah couldn't shake the looming question. What other truths about herself were still out there, waiting to be unearthed in the aftermath? The silence hung in the air after Sarah's declaration, a suspended moment where the outcome felt as precarious as glass on the edge of a table. Kevin's narrowed gaze scrutinized her, the tension in the room palpable, constricting around them like a tightening noose. It was no longer just about policy or procedure. It was an examination of her character and the strength of her resolve. As he opened his mouth to respond, Sarah braced herself, her pulse racing. She thought back to all the moments she had allowed doubt to govern her actions, moments driven by fear of consequences, fears that had often silenced her voice in critical situations. That day, however, her resolve was a palpable force urging her forward, compelling her to stand her ground. "Do you think your little group of dissenters can actually sway me?" Kevin scoffed, a sardonic smile slipping across his lips, challenging the unity they had crafted. Each chuckle from him felt like a personal attack, a reminder of her earlier self, small and silenced. In that moment, she remembered the stories that had been shared around the table, the hurt entailed in their silent sacrifices. Those were not the whispers of a timid intern, but the rising tide of a collective that she had helped galvanize. "Don't dismiss us so easily, Kevin," she said, her words firm yet calm. The other team members shifted in their seats, emboldened by her defiance. If she was to lead, she had to be more than just brave. She had to be unwavering. "We have data, testimonies, and a shared mission. You may think this is just gossip, but it's backed by undeniable truths." A flicker of surprise crossed his face, before hardening into a familiar assertiveness. "You think you can challenge the system you were so comfortable thriving in? That's rich, coming from you." His dismissal stung, evoking the insecurities nestled deep within her. For a brief moment Sarah hesitated, then she caught the confident gazes of her colleagues, grounding herself. "It's true, I've spent too long in the shadows, but what you see as comfort in complacency is now an awakening. Immediately, she was struck by her own chosen words. Awakening was exactly what she needed. An awakening to her own potential, to the strength lying dormant within her. The team was not only standing beside her, but rallying behind this newfound clarity she had unearthed. Kevin shifted in his seat, anger flaring. "This isn't a democracy, Sarah. You know that." With that blunt reminder, the air thickened again, but this time, determination fanned the flames of her courage. Maybe it's time for a change then. Perhaps what we need is exactly that, a revolution that starts with accountability. The next few moments passed in a blur of voices, rising and falling like ocean waves crashing against a sturdy shore. The discussion turned heated. Outlines of policy were obliterated by the passionate arguments of her colleagues, a compelling moment that made Sarah realize the depth of their shared frustration, a collective resilience that was finally standing its ground. Despite Kevin's crude attempts to divert the conversation, Sarah could feel the tide turning. Each statistic her colleagues shared chipped away at his defenses. She absorbed their confidence, their passion igniting something new and fierce in her heart. They had come together not merely out of fear, but because they each valued the integrity of their work. As the meeting progressed, she began to feel a part of something much larger than she had anticipated. They were not just there to confront Kevin, they were fighting for the principles that anchored their vocation every day. Inspired, she leaned in closer, her voice resonating with conviction. When he finally cut the meeting short, dismissively waving them off with a calculated air of disdain, anger surged through her again. "You may think you can silence us," she said, her voice steady. "But remember that every wave of discontent can crash down on even the mightiest walls." With those words hanging defiantly in the air, she felt the empowered heat of solidarity surround her. Leaving the meeting room together felt like crossing a threshold into a new phase of their professional lives, yet unease lingered in the back of her mind. How would Kevin retaliate? Would he truly allow them to act on their convictions? As they stepped out into the cool air, palpable with uncertainty, her thoughts whirled with implications of what she had uncovered about herself. Just then, Charlie from the team caught her eye. "You realize this is just the beginning, right?" he whispered, a sparkle of mischief playing across his face. Suddenly, with clarity, Sarah understood that the confrontation had unearthed not just a fight against authority, but also coaxed forth the facets of her identity she had kept hidden. The chill settled into a new intimacy, a bond formed in shared purpose. "What if this defines our legacy here?" she mused aloud, igniting a new conversation among them, one where they began to explore their next steps, envisioning a pathway to change, their ambitions tangling at the edges of fear and determination. In that moment, Sarah felt an abundance of possibilities blooming before her, but just as rapidly, the fear of what Kevin might do in retaliation loomed ominously overhead. The darkness of uncertainty that lay ahead promised challenges. But could this emerging leadership silhouette really stand the test? The time had come to prepare for the consequences, whatever they might be, forging ahead into a storm bearing down on the horizon. The days that followed unfurled like a tightly wound spring, each moment ripe with anticipation and anxiety. The atmosphere at work shifted, charged with a new dynamism. Sarah found herself caught between trepidation and exhilaration, the firm ground of her former complacency giving way to an uncertain terrain. Every glance from her colleagues carried unspoken questions, whether they were ready to confront the inevitable fallout, or if they would retreat into the shadows once more. In meetings, Kevin became more brusque, his previous outward confidence slipping to reveal a lingering unease. Sarah watched as he tried to quell dissent with dismissive remarks, but she sensed the edges of his authority fraying. She rallied the team to gather data and personal stories, each piece reinforcing their stance. Yet buried beneath her resolve, a kernel of doubt still flickered. Was she driving this momentum, or merely riding a wave that could soon crest and crash? One evening, while reviewing the collected testimonies at home, Sarah marveled at her colleagues' courage. Each story echoed like a drumbeat in her heart, igniting her sense of purpose. This wasn't just a fight. It was a testament to the resilience of individuals bound by a common cause. But her mind spiraled back to Kevin. How would he react when pushed into a corner? As she prepared for another team meeting, she felt a strange mixture of excitement and fear coursing through her. Would she be able to maintain the unity they had built, or would the mounting pressure cause cracks to appear? In the meeting room, her nerves coiled tightly as she took her place at the head of the table. The team buzzed with a mixture of apprehension and eagerness, their eyes glimmering with unshed hopes. She was struck by the weight of her role. She was no longer simply a participant determined to speak out. She had become a leader, bearing the hopes and fears of those around her. "Let's go over what we've gathered," she began, her voice steadying as she glanced around the room, feeling their support solidifying. "We need to present a united front, making it clear that we will not back down." A plan began to take shape, each new idea like a puzzle piece fitting snugly into the larger picture. Discussions flowed, igniting passion in each team member. Strategies emerged that put pressure on established norms. They were brainstorming unorthodox routes to elevate their message. Sarah felt the thrill of her leadership igniting, a beacon guiding them forward. But as they mapped out their next steps, the door swung open, and in strode Kevin, an imperious frown etched on his face. The room immediately fell silent, tension thickening the air again. She could sense the shift in energy. Battle lines were drawn. "So you think you can stage a little uprising?" he sneered, glancing pointedly at Sarah. Every ounce of confidence she had cultivated seemed to halt in her throat. "We all know who runs this place. Your little committee is nothing without me." His voice dripped with derision, and she felt the familiar sting of fear claw at her resolve. But this time, the colleagues around her didn't appear intimidated. They straightened in their chairs, shoulders back. They weren't just following her lead, they were ready to stand firm against the onslaught. "That's where you're mistaken, Kevin," she found her voice trembling but resolute. "We're ready to expose the cracks in the system you're so proud of." Kevin's expression darkened, and for a moment, uncertainty flickered in his eyes, revealing a chink in his armor. Sarah seized that moment of vulnerability, the tide of her courage cresting against his indomitable wall. The battle was no longer theoretical. It was raw, and the stakes felt higher than ever. As Kevin narrowed his gaze and appeared ready to retaliate, every heartbeat echoed with a haunting realization. This was a defining moment. As she held her ground, the air felt electric, charged with a potential she had only recently unearthed. Would she unleash the storm of repercussions? Could she and her team stand together against the might of Kevin's authority? The gravity of her position weighed upon her, shadowed by every unvoiced concern that had previously restrained her. Sarah felt the pulse of her burgeoning leadership beat steadily now, but she couldn't shake the looming question: what would she sacrifice to protect this newfound unity? The moment of truth was fast approaching, and the storm was too close to ignore. As Kevin opened his mouth to strike back, the silence crackled with unspoken anticipation. Would Sarah rise to confront him fully, or would she falter at the helm, allowing her fears to dictate the outcome? The moment stretched, a fragile web spun from uncertainty and resolve. As Kevin's lips formed words that sent a chill through the room, Sarah sensed a profound shift within herself, a quiet ember of fierce determination igniting. She had stepped into the role of a leader, but now that title demanded more from her than she had anticipated. "Do you think this is just about you?" Kevin's voice rang out, a sharp blade cutting through the tension. "Your idealism is misplaced. Keep pushing, and it's going to backfire." With each stinging remark, her colleagues shifted uneasily, eyes darting between Sarah and Kevin, as if gauging the potential fallout of this clash. She steeled herself against the anxiety building in her chest, visibly shaking off the feeling like a frostbitten cloak. This wasn't just about defiance, it was about accountability, not just for Kevin, but for herself. "Backfire on whom, Kevin?" she retorted, her tone unexpectedly commanding. She held his gaze, searching for any hint of doubt in his bravado. "The team is ready to voice their experiences, and they won't be ignored any longer." The room vibrated with the rising fervor among her teammates. They leaned forward, rallying behind her, their unity palpable and invigorating. Kevin scoffed, but she detected an uneasy flicker in his eyes. "You think you can discredit my authority with your little stories? Those tales won't change anything." Words failed her momentarily, drowning her in a sea of doubt, but she refused to be swept under. "You'd be surprised what impact stories can have, especially when they're lived truths." With each assertion, the weight of her intentions became clearer. This fight wasn't rooted solely in rebellion. It reflected her longing for integrity in a space tarnished by complacency. The room felt alive, a tempest of possibility swirling around them. She could almost touch it. But with this surge came a haunting realization. This wasn't merely Kevin's battle, it was hers. Faced with the consequences of leading this charge, she stood poised before the precipice of decision. "Let's not play games," Kevin sneered, now more rattled than offended. "You think rallying around a few grievances will hold up against the structure of our company? It's naive." "Naive is thinking fear will keep everyone in line," she replied, drawing strength from the undeniable camaraderie filling the room. "You're right about one thing. I will not sit back and allow you to stifle our voices." Silence gripped the air again, but an undercurrent of change thrummed with the electricity of collective resolve. Her colleagues nodded, emboldened by her stance. As the meeting shifted back to the potential next steps, Sarah felt her heart racing, each beat a reminder of a path she could no longer ignore. Her voice, once limited and contained, now rang with the power of purpose. She began to map out tactics with renewed vigor. They spoke of reaching out to higher management, of documenting every grievance and proposed solution, capturing these moments as the foundation for their inevitable demands. But just as the spirit of unified purpose soared, a flicker of uneasiness snaked through Sarah's thoughts. What would transpire once their concerns were laid bare? What if the battle for their identities and dignity opened a chasm they could not navigate? As passion pulsed through each plan discussed, doubt crept back in with a terrifying realization. What would her role entail once they crossed this threshold? Sacrifices loomed large, each with deep personal ramifications. Standing tall carried weight in every direction. While she felt their support, what would happen when the repercussions of their actions cascaded down? "Prepare yourselves," she grimly reminded her team. "Standing up means something, and Kevin won't take this lightly." She could almost feel the imminent storm brewing, ready to engulf them in its fury, a manifestation of every burgeoning fear. Yet a spark of unyielding hope blossomed within, daring her to embrace the unknown regardless of the terrain. But as Kevin's voice echoed in her mind, she understood her next confrontation with him wasn't just professional. There was a personal reckoning sitting on the cusp of their discourse. The fight that lay ahead was about more than authority. It was about self-discovery and growth. With clarity emerging through the fog, she found herself thinking about what it meant to truly lead. Would she be sufficient for the challenge? The immediate task lay in galvanizing her team, but the deeper question loomed. What hidden strengths might she uncover along the way that could redefine her as both a leader and an individual? As they wrapped up the meeting, Sarah felt a brewing storm of anticipation, the air thick with uncharted territory. What was the cost of this journey toward truth? The path unfurled wider yet, threading through complex layers of authority and belonging. A decisive moment awaited her. She could sense it, and so could her colleagues. Would Sarah cross into the unknown, or would the challenge become too great, unraveling the fabric of what she had built? The door to transformation was open, breathlessly waiting for her next step. The day arrived that would define the course of Sarah's career and her role as a mother. She stood in front of the hospital's administrative office, heart pounding, her breath shallow yet resolute. With each passing moment, she reviewed the facts gathered, the testimonies circulating in her folder, and the support stoked among her colleagues. These were the tools of her emergence as not just a caregiver, but a leader committed to dismantling the very silences that had thwarted her for too long. As she entered the sterile, fluorescent-lit conference room, Sarah felt her colleagues' presence behind her, a palpable energy that fortified her resolve. Today was not just another attempt to address work culture, it was the power of collective acknowledgement demanding validation. "We are here to challenge a pervasive injustice," she reminded herself, clenching the folder tightly in her hands. When she stepped forward to speak, the room was full. Kevin sat at the head of the table, an imperious expression masking any signs of vulnerability. Yet even he couldn't hide the slight tension in his posture as her colleagues filled the seats, resolute and ready to back her up. "Thank you for meeting with us," Sarah began, her voice steady, echoing off the sterile walls. We have gathered evidence that clearly outlines a systemic issue in our workplace that jeopardizes patient care and staff morale. We must prioritize integrity and accountability in our practices. The surrounding tension hung heavy but not oppressive. This felt different. Empowerment poured from everyone present. As she spoke, Sarah recounted stories shared during previous meetings, each testimony a thread interwoven into the greater narrative of pain and discomfort. The frustration simmering beneath the surface began to resonate with her audience. Expressions of support flickered like a candle's flame. "I'll not sit back and allow fear to dictate our actions any longer," Sarah asserted, drawing in a deep breath to channel the legacy of courage her grandfather had passed down to her. "We need equitable treatment and practices that reflect our values as caregivers." As her confidence surged, she felt an awakening within, a transformative shift from passivity to active engagement. Kevin's reaction was immediate. He leaned forward, arms crossed tightly across his chest. "And what makes you think you can come in here with a group of disgruntled employees and demand change? What you're advocating for is reckless." The air turned electric. Sarah held her ground. "We're not recklessly seeking change, we're demanding accountability. Your leadership created an environment where silence has become the norm. Your methods are harming our patients and degrading the professional ethos we all stand for. We will not let fear control us any longer." Collective murmurs of agreement from her colleagues reinforced her stance. This was no longer just about Sarah's quest for justice. It was a commitment from the group, a foundation built on trust and shared principles. As she moved to present the collected data, her heart swelled with pride. Each piece meticulously documented revealed not only a pattern of neglect, but also the rising action of individuals willing to confront the injustice together. Sarah witnessed their united front. It radiated strength that Kevin seemed unprepared for. But as the meeting progressed, cracks began to appear in the facade of Kevin's authority. For the first time, insecurity flickered through his eyes, and the air shifted decisively. He was losing control. "What you're asserting is a reckless fabrication," he spat out, attempting to push back. But Sarah spotted the erratic tremor in his voice, a sign of desperation that encouraged her to press on. "Tell that to our patients who suffer as a result of your dismissive oversight," she countered, her blood surging with adrenaline. The weight of the truth hung heavy. Sarah realized she was no longer operating from a place of mere survival. She was seizing her power. With her colleagues by her side, they presented the proposal for change, clear deliverables, support systems, and a restructured protocol for reporting grievances. "We want proactive measures that ensure accountability and prioritize the welfare of both patients and staff alike," she concluded, her words echoing with undeniable conviction. As Kevin floundered, struggling to recover his authority, he pointedly declared, "If you think this is going to end well for you, you are sorely mistaken." Yet somewhere deep inside her, she felt freed. "What is this if not a chance to reshape how we serve our community?" she replied. The confidence in her voice carried the entire room, echoing loudly that they were no longer bound by the same fears. With that statement, something shifted dramatically. As she and her colleagues walked out of that room, she felt a burden lift. They had crossed a threshold from silence into action. There would be consequences, but she was ready to navigate them. In her heart, she envisioned the kind of mother she wanted to be, one who exemplified strength, integrity, and the courage to stand up for what was right. Her commitment to create a better environment for Lily and all patients was unwavering. As she stepped outside into the clear spring air, the weight of her journey felt lighter. A new legacy had begun to fiercely unfold, not just for herself, but for her daughter, echoing the profound shift in confidence that would lead her to greater heights. With each step forward, she knew she was no longer merely surviving in fear. She was thriving through the courage of collective voices, confident in her place as a true leader in the battle for justice and integrity. Now she was truly complete, embodying a warrior spirit vital to her professional identity and personal evolution. The sun pierced through the clouds, illuminating her with an understanding. They had begun a movement, one that would resonate far beyond the walls of that hospital, and she would face whatever consequences followed with her head held high. This was just the beginning. As she perfectly summed up her thoughts, she knew this fight would inspire others. the torch of genuine change now flickering brightly within her grasp. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support, and don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.